Billy Porter calls on America to finally listen to the black voices as he speaks out for black LGBTQ rights. Our lives matter too. Police brutality and racism has been going on for so long that it has gotten to the tipping point. And because it's gotten to a tipping point, everything had to explode. And now you see the protests and riots all over the United States. After reading this article, there's one statement that I do agree with Billy Porter, but the rest of everything that he said, I do not agree with it. I find it to be BS. I find it to be bullshit. The statement that I do agree with Bill Porter, the openly gay man, is that is this. This country was built on tyranny, violence, genocide, and slavery. Period. He's talking about the United States. It was built on tyranny, violence, genocide, and slavery. That is true, and that is a statement I do agree with him. The rest of everything that he stated, Billy Porter, the openly gay man, I do not agree with him. Bill Porter called out the black community for the lack of support for black LGBT lives. I'm actually happy that the black community do not support black LGBT lives and shouldn't. Because the black LGBT lives is anti-family. The black LGBT life is pro-black people. The LGBT life is the destruction of black familyhood. Let me put it in this way. The more black life, the more the black community decide to support the LGBT rights, the more they're creating a room for the destruction of black people. Because imagine this. Let's say with an openly promotion of LGBT in the United States, just the United States, don't include Africa because we're fighting against that shit. In the United States, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, you have about half of the population of black people promoting and accepting homosexuality or LGBTQ. What would that mean? That would mean more people, or at least half of the population, are not procreating. And because you're not procreating, the black people in the United States are dying. And the more they're dying, and lack of procreation, that's a destruction of the black people. So blacks in the United States should be anti-LGBTQ. 100%. Or at least fight it. Don't accept it. Because it's going to be the demise of blacks in the United States. When more people openly accept LGBTQ in the black community, you will have less children being born. And when you have less population of people being born, what's going to happen in the future? When more people are gay and they're not procreating. You give it a couple more years, 300 years, 500 years, even 1,000 years, you won't have no black person in the United States because they have accepted homosexuality, and you have men getting married to men and women getting married to women, and there's no procreation. You pretty much single-handedly destroy the black in the United States for that. A behavior a behavior that a few black people have decided to accept and then want every other people to welcome. For what? So I disagree with you, Billy Porter, and I'm actually happy that the black community is standing against the LGBT rights. Yeah. They're not accepting it. And because you're not accepting, you shouldn't promote it. Because it's a bad behavior. Billy Porter stated that you cannot expect our demands of equality to be met with any real legislative policy and change when you turn around and inflict the same kind of hate and oppression on us. In other words, Billy Porter is saying that since the black community are oppressing and promoting hate towards the LGBT rights or LGBT people, then the black community should not gain full equal rights. LGBTQ black community is standing on the way for pro-black people or pro-black blacks in the United States to gain their rights. So this is what the pro-black community in the United States must do. Blacks who believe in familyhood should stand and fight for their rights through Pan-African ideologies, pro-black ideologies. And when the black LGBT community knows that this is what you're standing for, then they won't support that. And the pro-black community would not support the LGBT. This movement against police brutality and racism is being carried out by pro-black Americans. It should be for that. And if the black LGBT want to fight for their own rights, then they should organize and do that. This is two completely different things. One is fighting for sexuality, and then one other is fighting for human rights. The LGBT is fighting for the black LGBT is fighting for sexuality, not humanity. And the black community in the United States is fighting for humanity, because their humanity has been taken away by the whites and every other races that dehumanize blacks in the United States. I mean, you can't have your bread and eat it too. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be gay and expect, or be LGBT and expect people who are pro-black, who are for black familyhood, to support such behavior. But then again, I said the LGBT is on the way for the black community to gain their human rights. Because so long as the black community speaks with one voice and fight against racism and discrimination, eventually they will get it. But you have the LGBT that is trying to put their own nonsense in this movement because they're not being treated fairly by the black community as well as the white community who are against LGBT rights. It's ridiculous. But these are the little things that stop black people from actually achieving what they need to achieve. because there's always going to be a few that's always going to be on the way. The LGBT black folks are black people too, Billy Porter said. But I said no. The LGBT black folks are not black people. They are special black people. They have decided to make themselves special, different from the rest of the black community. Because the rest of the black community, at least most of them, are getting married and having children. But the LGBT is getting married, cannot have children because it's impossible. That's not how the world was designed. That's not how God, nature created man or mankind. Nature created mankind for a man and a woman to procreate, not for a man and a man to get married, whom they cannot procreate. And then you want people who are procreating and having children because that is the norm of any society. You grow up, you have your own children, and the old die, and the children continue. They do the same. It's a cycle. It's a continuous cycle that blacks that were brought here in the United States and turned into slaves had to continue. For their children to be born, they had to come together, a man and a woman. And that has been going on for 100, 200, 300, 400 years. And in that 200, 300, 400 years, they have been catching hell from whites. They have been catching hell from whites. And then you and I have a special group within the black community known as the LGBT who want to be treated fairly when the people who have been catching hell for 400 years are not being treated fairly. A special group that actually gained more rights during President Obama's term than the black community. A special group that is holding back 40 million blacks in the United States from gaining their humanity because they want to be recognized as LGBTQ. So the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement for humanity, black humanity, fighting for black humanity, not fighting for a special few group. You gotta look at the general purpose. The general purpose is for black people to gain their own humanity, to be seen and treated as humans. But you got a few who are trying to hold the rest of the black community backward because they too want to get their own special sexual favors to be accepted and tolerated, which will actually destroy the black familyhood if the black familyhood decide to promote such garbage. And then you talk about voting. Voting will not and cannot help the black familyhood because two parties, Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and both are always anti-black. They may say they are not anti-black, but they are always anti-black because if they weren't, the racism in the United States would not be that high. So voting for the Republican or Democrat will not change shit. But organizing a pro-black movement and then globalizing that pro-black movement will actually give you the power you need, because black people need power to change things. But the 42 million in the United States cannot have the power by themselves to change what is happening in the United States, because there's a small group within the United States. But if that 42 million can connect to other black people around the world, as you've seen how the protest has been globalized in a way through Europe, some part of Africa. People are standing up for Black Lives Matter, even though they don't believe it. The whites who are standing for Black Lives Matter don't believe it. They have their own reasons, they have their own purpose. But so long as blacks can use that and connect with other blacks and create a structure of power, then you have the opportunity to change the racism happening in the United States, and not just in the United States, and around the world, because that must be changed. You have white power structure around the world, and the white power structure controls what is happening. So in order to change the white structure power, you need a black structure power, a global black structure power, to have influence in the world. Otherwise, you always have to be on your knees begging from the white man to do what must be done by the black people. We need change, but the change must be pro-black, Pan-African black. Nothing else but that. And the promotion of LGBTQ lives matter and all that crap, that's bullshit. It's BS. It's actually anti-black. LGBT movement or whatever is anti-black. It's anti-pro-black. It's anti-black familyhood. Actually destroys the black familyhood. It doesn't help it. And the more people promote such ideologies, the more the ideologies picks up, and before you know, more than half of the world is practicing such nonsense. Well, the whites could practice it, I don't give a damn. But I'm just against the blacks and the world practicing such nonsense, because it will lead to the demise, it will lead to the destruction of black people. I'm just keeping it real.